And the third is just the misinformation and the lies. Authoritarianism is about, conveying absurdities, lies in part to the public, to people close to you in politics. To, if you want to be in good graces with the leader, then you have to absorb the lies. If you don't, you get kicked out. And then we can't tell truth from fact. And that's one of the beauties, frankly, of the judicial system. There are rules of evidence. You cannot, in this moment, it's functioning, you cannot submit to a jury evidence that has not been validated. And the jury's verdict gets appealed to other judges. I mean, it is this bastion of accuracy, facts. I mean, it gets it wrong, let's be clear. But it's very, very different from X, from, TikTok, and certainly from the stuff that's coming out of our politicians. And those two pieces, our judicial system and our electoral system, today are still holding, and that gives me some hope. But they both really need all of us to come together and hold hands and shore it up for the next generation.
Well, Kimberly Whaley is a professor at the University of Baltimore School of Law and former assistant U.S. attorney in Washington. Author most recently of Pardon Power, How the Pardon System Works and Why. Professor Whaley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
And by the way, once again, before we wrap up today, next week we're working on a show about all those political ads, especially if you live in 7 swing states, because $10 billion is being spent on you and what you're watching on TV. So listeners in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and North Carolina, and Georgia, we really want to hear from you, because I think the rest of the country has no clue about how you are being inundated with political and campaign ads. What's your take on those ads? Are they having an impact on you, or do you just wish they would go away? Send us a message on the On Point Vox Pop app, or call us at 617-353-0683. We'll share your thoughts next week. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from the Museum of Science in Boston, dedicated to inspiring a lifelong love of science in everyone, in museums, classrooms, and online, offering engineering design challenges, digital experiences, live presentations, and more. MOS.org. And WBUR presenting Endless Thread, a podcast about the Internet's untold histories and unsolved mysteries, from stories about a mountain of dishware in the woods to the world's largest glitter consumer. Endless Thread. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
KUOW-FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham. It's a minute before noon on a Friday, which means KUOW's Week in Review is coming up. Here's your host, Bill Radke.
Hello. In the Boeing machinists strike, we're going to ask who has the leverage and how might this end up. Also, has Seattle gone too far in telling landlords how they can choose and treat their tenants? How did we get from Washington State legalizes pot to both presidential candidates endorse legalizing pot? And what made us smile this week that could potentially make you smile as well? That's the kind of the thing we do on Week in Review, and we're going to do it again.
Support for KUOW comes from Puget Sound Energy, offering their Green Power program that provides customers with the ability to reduce their environmental impact with renewable energy made from wind and solar. Learn more about how to participate at pse.com/greenpower.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
On this week's On the Media, we're at that point in the presidential race where everyone's dropping the F-bomb.
In 2018, when I said this is a fascist social and political movement and people freaked out, that was one thing, but it's 2024 right now.
On this week's On the Media from WNYC.
Sunday evening at 6 o'clock on 94.9 KUOW and KUOW.org.
Support for KUOW comes from Finney Ridge Cabinet Company, custom and semi-custom cabinets designed with the goal of making homes functional, beautiful, and livable. Featuring Solera Fine Cabinetry. Learn more at prcabinets.com.
.55 degrees in Seattle, partly sunny, the forecast for this afternoon. Expected high 62. Good chance of rain overnight and tomorrow and Sunday. It's 12:01.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Vice President Kamala Harris is campaigning in Houston, Texas today. She's warning voters about what's at stake when it comes to protecting reproductive freedoms.
Real harm has occurred in our country. A real suffering has occurred. People have died. And it is important to highlight this issue because this is among the most critical issues that the American people will address when they vote for who will be the next president of the United States.
Former President Donald Trump is also stomping in Texas today. Addressing supporters in Austin, Trump placed the blame on his Democratic opponent for the influx of migrants crossing the southern border illegally.
We're like a dumping ground. What Kamala Harris has done on our border is cruel, it's vile, and it's absolutely heartless. Her policy of importing migrant gangs is a crime against our country. It's actually a crime against humanity.
Harris will hold a campaign rally alongside music icons Beyoncé and Willie Nelson tonight in Houston. Trump will travel to the swing state of Michigan for an event. President Biden formally apologized today for the suffering that Indigenous children endured in boarding schools for more than 150 years. Many of the children experienced physical, mental, and sexual abuse during that time. 950 died. Speaking in Gila River Indian Community in Arizona, Biden said a formal apology is long overdue.
After 150 years, the United States government eventually stopped the program. But the federal government has never formally apologized for what happened until today. I formally apologize as President of the United States of America for what we did. I formally apologize.
Biden's message is the first public apology from a sitting U.S. president in response to a federal policy that devastated tribal communities and culture. Israeli strikes on a hospital in North Gaza yesterday have left the facility almost non-functional. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi reports this comes as Israel intensifies its incursion in northern Gaza.
In a TV interview with Al Jazeera from inside the Kamal Adwan hospital during the attack in North Gaza, director Dr. Hussam Abu Safieh said that the hospital was suddenly besieged by Israeli tanks on Thursday and everyone was ordered to evacuate. With the sound of shooting behind him, Abu Safieh said that the two upper floors of the hospital were attacked and troops shot at the windows. Abu Safieh said around 160 injured Palestinians needed medical attention and at least 14 children lay in the intensive care unit. Kamal Adwan is one of the three hospitals in the north left largely inaccessible because of the fighting. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
This is NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Kevin Kniested in Seattle. Investigators with the King County Sheriff's Office have accused a 15-year-old of shooting and killing his parents and three siblings. He's also accused of attempting to stage the scene to avoid responsibility. KUOW's Amy Radel has more.
Prosecutors have charged the 15-year-old with 5 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. They're seeking to have him tried in adult court, where he could receive a lengthier sentence.
Based on the details in the charging documents, prosecutors are asking a judge for a hearing at which time both parties will present evidence and the judge will make the determination if the 15-year-old will be moved to adult court.
That's Casey McNerthney, spokesperson for King County prosecutors. One sibling, an 11-year-old girl, was wounded but managed to escape to a neighbor's house. She told investigators she saw her oldest brother use his father's handgun to kill their other family members. An arraignment is scheduled for Friday. Amy Radel, KUOW News.
Tonight, families of people from Washington who were killed by the Israeli military will be speaking publicly together for the first time at the University of Washington. They'll be reflecting on loved ones who volunteered for pro-Palestinian organizations before they were killed. KUOW's Gustavo Segura reports.
Hamid Ali was the husband of Aishnor Egi. He sees his wife's killing making an impact beyond their circle of friends, but he wishes it didn't have to be this way.
Whatever positive things one might associate with being a martyr, like being remembered and having like a legacy, I'd trade all of that just to have her back.
Egi was volunteering for a human rights Palestinian group raising awareness over Israel-sanctioned settlements in the West Bank. Those settlements are a violation of international law, according to the United Nations. He, along with friends of Egi, will be speaking at a panel alongside the family of Rachel Corrie, another Washingtonian who was killed by the Israeli military more than 20 years ago. Gustavo Sagredo, KUOW News.
Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. Hi, I'm Bill Radke. I say hi to listeners. I say hi to viewers because we do live stream the show. We got some cameras here and we're on YouTube. You just search KUOW and you can watch Geekwire contributing editor Mike Lewis. Hi, Mike.
Good morning, Bill.
Nice to see you.
Or good day, Bill, I guess.
Good day. Good noon to you. 12 bells. Political analyst and contributing columnist. Welcome back, Joni Balter.
Good to see you and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mike.
Executive Director of Commute Seattle. Welcome back. Alex Hudson, nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Who's going to be our next president?
Oh, God.
Kamala Harris.
Okay.
I actually feel that more than I have before.
Oh.
Mike, got a feeling?
Well, the feelings alternate between dread
Yes.
and hope.
That's relatable.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see. Let's get into the news of the week, local-wise. This week, Boeing's machinist union members rejected the latest contract offer, a 64% no vote. So the 6-week strike goes on. Assembly plants in Everett and Renton remain shut down. Machinist Bartley Stokes says Boeing needs to listen to workers.
We're the ones that make it happen, building the airplane, and they're still not recognizing the fact that they wouldn't be where they're at or be receiving what they're receiving if it weren't for us down on the floor building the airplane.
Machinist Jack Pleasant has been with Boeing 15 years. He's glad the union said no.
It's about time that people started to stand up against a machine, and it's going to be tough for a lot of people, but it's well worth it.
Well worth it. He sounds confident that the union will get a better offer. With Boeing just reporting a $6 billion loss last quarter, Joni, which side has more leverage?
I think it's pretty obvious here that...
I like to ask the obvious questions
No,
first.
you never do, but this time. Look, Boeing is on its heels. The amount of loss that you just cited. The confidence in the requests from the workers. I mean, they turned down, I was actually surprised, I don't know if anybody else was, they turned down pretty juicy offer, nearly 40% pay increase over 4 years, a signing bonus that was part of it, a pretty meager contribution to the 401k, which is where I think some of the action is here. But clearly, Boeing is doing about as badly as it has done since perhaps the 70s. I wasn't here, but last person to leave Seattle.
Please turn out the lights.
Those lights. So they're on their heels. They are highly dependent on a very trained workforce, a skilled workforce. They don't have time in this current environment to go figure out, what other cheaper city can we build airplanes in? These folks are trained and they have the edge here, for sure.
Does that mean, I ask this to all of you, does that mean, if that's true, that workers will get a contract they can accept? Does that mean Boeing will then eventually permanently shut down work here and just move out of Washington State?
I think that's going to be the opposite. I think that the solution to them is being here. But
yeah, that seems like a dichotomy that doesn't feel like where we're heading, right? The promise of the CEO to be continuing to build and manufacture planes right here in our region feels legitimate. And I think that it's really clear that the political wins and the foundation of our manufacturing economy here is going to rely on Boeing, and that Boeing's best time as a company was when they were building their planes here in Seattle, and they probably want to return to those good times.
I'd be interested to see, and I know the union's not going to release this information, but I'd be very interested to see the age of the people and the split in the vote. I suspect that the vote was mostly the older, long-time machinists who are still thinking pension. I bet the younger folks who don't see a lifetime at Boeing probably were happy with a raise that gives them some sort of financial benefit over the next 10 years, but they don't need a pension because no one probably 30 or under, 35 or under is even thinking pension unless they're in government work, right? So the pension issue is the hang-up issue. No one in the union was angry about the 40% raise, right?
Mike,
they didn't really reject
to fill that in,
yes.
Mike. This is like a decade ago. Boeing threatened to build the 777X someplace else if the machinists union didn't give up the pension. And this week, the union's leader said that anger and hurt is still fresh.
This contract struggle began over 10 years ago. The company overreached and created a wound that may never heal for our members.
So that's a little background for those who are not steeped in this, as we are.
And so the pension was replaced, as it has been in most places in America, with 401k, which is not anywhere near as lucrative over the line. Can be okay, and depending on what the match is, can be a pretty decent way to get a retirement.
And how the market does.
But a pension is a whole different category of guaranteed income when you get older. And this is something that is a concern, particularly if you're an employee in your 40s and above. So I think the pension issue is going to be, if they can solve it, I don't think Boeing's going to flex much on this. I think that this is going to be a little harder. I think the machinists do have a lot of leverage here, but their leverage, everyone's leverage at some point expires. And I think in this particular case, the pension is going to be another $300 million to Boeing, an insane amount of money. And I'm not anti-pension. I'm very pro-pension, but the world has moved on from it. And I don't know that it's going to be easy for them to get the pension that they want. And I understand. I remember that fight 10 years ago. I remember it well. It was a mistake then, but I don't know that they can replicate or they can actually fix that mistake now.
So want to bet that that's where the next offer is focused on? It won't be, like you're saying, a defined benefit, a pension, but it will be probably, I'm just guessing this, a more major contribution to the 401k.
That's almost the only place for it to go.
Because also, I heard many workers saying, look, this is backbreaking work. I need to know that I'll be protected at the end of this length of work.
Yeah. The new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, said that Boeing needs a fundamental culture change.
We need to be on the factory floors, in the back shops, and in our engineering labs. We need to know what's going on, not only with our products, but with our people. And most importantly, we need to prevent the festering of issues and work better together to identify, fix, and understand root cause.
Now, those are controversial words. Some critics say we need to not know what's going on with our products and people, and that we should encourage the festering of issues. And we should ignore root causes in favor of those causes which are just at the very, very tip.
Well, I can see you've worked in media for a long time.
Exactly.
Nicely done.
But
nicely done.
Thank you. Alex, but you took those culture change, I think those culture change comments to mean, this is Ortberg saying, we got to get back to being right here in Western Washington, right where we're going to assemble these planes. Maybe we even produce it even more. You see Ortberg do you think even bringing the headquarters back to Seattle, the whole deal?
I mean, that would be amazing for the economy of our region, and I would love for them to consider whether or not a return to the best time in the company's reputation, profitability, and their product is the direction that they want to go. I think that, to the point around the pension, right, this is why this matters so deeply beyond just AIM and to the rest of organized labor, because, as you said, the rollback of a defined retirement benefit like the pension has retreated all the way just now to the public sector. Right. So this is a bigger battle for working people in America, and I think that it'll be hard for AIM to let go of that. Certainly,
The machinist union.
Yeah, the machinist union. I think that Boeing should return to building great planes right here in Seattle and contribute to the strong and healthy middle class that has made our region be economically prosperous across all sectors.
And so I fixated on the same quote that you played there, Bill. And, the sort of master narrative of Boeing is they were engineer driven, right? And the confidence that came with that. If it ain't Boeing, I'm not going. But then the whole moving out of town, pandering to Wall Street, that clearly was a mistake. And in that quote, we need to be closely integrated. It seems to me that Ortberg is hinting that he gets that. Now, how he gets there is going to take so much money and time.
Yeah, I'm a little more skeptical.
I'm a little more skeptical.
That's a really simple thing to say, and it's the right thing to say now. And anyone who does any reading on it he arrived at the point that a whole bunch of advisors would say, "Hey, this is what you need to say." I mean, the thing about Boeing is Boeing had this chance, and I when we were discussing exchanging emails, discussing the show in advance, and I went on sort of a screed about this. I'll make it brief, I promise, Bill. Boeing had this chance.
A
brief screed.
Go for it.
Yes, fortune size. Boeing had this chance in 2006 with Alan Mulally. Alan Mulally is one of the more talented managers to ever roll through there, and one of the best engineers. He was involved in every major project, the 777, which was the first all-digital airplane. I mean, this is a guy who was perfect, a Boeing lifer who wanted to run the company, was in line to do it, and then the board went another direction and decided, and this is where we are today. He went on to run Ford and turn it into, at the time, the best auto company in America by every measure. And so what did Boeing do at that point? Well, Boeing had already made the mistake of putting all the McDonnell Douglas people at the top, and that's been talked about and talked about and talked about. They had a chance to reverse that with a Boeing lifer who actually was an exceedingly talented guy and a good leader, and didn't do it then. What has Boeing done since? It's been this parade of people who get incredible compensation packages because they are incentivized to manage for their stock value, and they're not incentivized to manage for an airplane. So until they change the incentive, they are not going to change the outcome.
Let me check how that's worked out for the stock value. Let me just say.
It's absolutely.
Precisely.
Absolute bottom.
They're going to need to do much more than a CEO. This culture change thing that they're going to try to do, which has to start at the top, is not going to change until they decide that the way they compensate upper managers is not going to be related to short-term gain. As long as it's short-term gain, this is the company we're going to get.
Well, as you mentioned, the stock price, that just means that he's under that much more pressure to do this quickly when this is a long-term job.
Right. Well, and the long-term benefit of getting it right is that you build back the reputation of this organization and you stop having planes fall out of the sky. Yeah. Like, these problems and this issue of what's going on with the machinists is 4 years down the line from Boeing having serious problem after problem after problem that is showing up because of issues on their floor.
Yeah. Okay. And I always, maybe this is the last time I have to disclose. I always say that my wife works at Boeing, so I'm above board about that. She no longer works at Boeing. She's one of those who has lost her job, so we're out of that game. But we really believe that when one door closes, another blows open at 16,000 feet over Portland.
I knew that. I knew it.
You knew it. You knew it.
I didn't see it as quickly as I should have.
Okay, before we take a break, Mike, let's say whether or not airplane production goes elsewhere, would you say at least our tech sector will add jobs forever?
No, but I would say that the tech sector grew explosively in the pandemic, and now it's normalizing.
Just to finish my thought, the news here is that in the past couple of years, according to the state, Washington State, tech is our region's fastest shrinking industry in terms of jobs.
Right, and it's actually shrinking back to a more normalized level. They went crazy in hiring during the pandemic, and we're offering all kinds of incentives, including remote work, and we've seen how that has worked out. They're rolling back. The tech sector is obviously very important, and everyone forgets, just to dovetail to our earlier issue, Boeing is a primary player in the tech sector as well. It's not simply building aircraft. Mm-hmm. And those are places that hire from each other regarding quality engineers and programmers, because increasingly airplanes are programmed. They're more than piloted.
Everything is tech.
Totally. So So this is a normalization. That there's been a big rollback. But what's also happening here is the return to work thing is a way to get a level of attrition at these companies. They're going to stop offering working from home. They're going to stop offering even hybrid. I think some of them are going to. Certainly Amazon is pushing hard that direction. It is not solely for a collaborative environment, which is what they like to say a lot, because a lot of what they're doing is walk inside. I don't see much collaboration. I see a lot of collaboration on whatever their chat feature is. I don't see a lot of in-person discussion. And so what is happening here is they're looking at making people a little bit more uncomfortable and making them decide whether or not they really want to work at this place or not. This is the cheapest possible way to get attrition, is to get someone to quit. Simple. And this is what's going on right now.
And this has been going on the whole time of work from home. Amazon has just been way more zealous, for example, compared to, say, Microsoft, which you will notice is not saying you have to come back to the office starting January 2nd for 5 days a week. They're proud of, it seems, that roughly the most of the workers work from home maybe 50% of the time.
But they've also had sizable layoffs. I mean, they're just going the layoff.
They've also had the
route.
layoffs too, but they're not trying to get more layoffs through attrition in the way that they speak to their employees at the moment.
Yeah, tech's always evolving, right? So Amazon is far and away the biggest employer. I think the intersection of the difference between Amazon in downtown Seattle and Microsoft and its
right.
home community can't be overstated, right?
That's right.
It's very clear that we gave a whole part of our downtown is the corporate campus of Amazon, and that it's going to be very difficult to support the broader part of downtown unless and until we have enough people to reach the capacity of what downtown was built for. But the tech sector going anywhere, I don't think so. And because people always forget, we have cheap energy here. And tech needs energy, especially AI, right? You have to have this electricity, and ours remaining some of the lowest cost electricity in the country is going to keep this sector here, as well as,
till all those nuclear plants come online.
Well, we can build those here too. And the other thing is if you look at some of the polling that gets done, people want to be in Seattle. They want to be in Seattle because it's beautiful. There are not other places that are as uniquely beautiful, rich with natural resources, or just like enchanting to be at, or certainly have a more livable climate in a changing world. And so as the companies kind of shift around their own internal policies, yes, but will those workers flee to other places? We're the kind of subsidiary or the moons of that.
The satellites?
The satellites of that industry go anywhere. I mean, Mike, you're more the expert than I am, but I think that we have some underlying attractions here that will keep talent and companies in our industry.
Well, and the other reason that companies are here is that they can hire from each other, right? I mean, once you build up a critical mass of engineers, that's why Snapchat is here, that's why Facebook is here, that's why Google is here. I mean, that you can go down the list and they're all trying to hire from each other. And that also is what is going to put at least a little bit of a hold on the work from home, because if no one else is offering it, then you're not going to offer it. But if other people are and you're trying to be competitive in the workplace, all of those perks start coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that AI could bring some of that heat back to the tech industry hiring.
I thought AI was going to replace humans. Not so?
It's going to replace some too, of course, but it also could bring back quite add the heat back to the overheated and now cooling tech hiring here.
Right. Maybe we will run the human replacement operation from here with some humans.
Maybe we already have. Maybe we're not even here right now.
Whoa. Where are we? Where is anything?
Exactly.
Where?
Thank you. Who even is Mike Lewis?
Oh my God. It's his avatar.
Oddly
right
enough,
here.
I hear that question a lot.
We have been discussing tech hiring going down. In fact, shrinking, laying people off the last couple of years. Before that, we discussed the rejection by the Machinists Union of the latest Boeing contract offer. By the way, I've not heard of any negotiations going on between the Machinists and Boeing. We'll follow all of that for you with, I'll tell you who he is, Geekwire's contributing editor Mike Lewis, political analyst Joni Balter, Commute Seattle's Alex Hudson. I'm Bill Radke. We're going to take a quick break and come right back with more news of this week.
It's 55 degrees in Seattle, partly sunny the forecast for this afternoon with an expected high of 62. This is 94.9 KUOW Seattle. It's 12:25.
Voting by mail has become increasingly popular.
It's a practice that began during the Civil War.
When you've got 1 million men in arms by the high point of the war, this is a huge proportion of the voting public that you're disfranchising unless you make special arrangements for them.
The history of how we vote.
On Throughline from NPR.
Tomorrow afternoon, Saturday afternoon at 3 on 94.9 KUOW.
Support for KUOW comes from Horizon House. Horizon House, independent living on Seattle's First Hill, welcomes adults 62 and over from diverse backgrounds and cultures, including LGBTQ+. Learn more at horizonhouse.org.
And from Archbright, offering virtual and in-person management training on coaching, communication, delegation, and collaboration. Available for individual enrollment or as private team trainings. Details at archbright.com.
You're listening to KUOW's Week in Review, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see Joni Balter, Alex Hudson, Bill Radke, and Mike Lewis's avatar. Continuing with the news of this week, a Seattle landlord has sued the city claiming that its renter protection laws are overly unfair to the property owners. Do you think Seattle leans too far, Mike, in favor of renters?
Well, that's if you go back through history, it's leaned far in favor of landlords, and then it's leaned farther in favor of renters. The issue here is the notion of a taking. There's the physical taking if the government actually moves onto your property and takes your land, and then there's the regulatory taking, which means they've regulated your use of your private land to such a degree that it lacks value, it lacks purpose.
That's the claim in this lawsuit.
That's the claim in this lawsuit, that the regulations, the restrictions on evictions, the requirement of resettlement, moving money, all of this,
6 months
no background,
notice of rent increases.
6 months notice of all of that sort of stuff. I suspect that given for Seattle, rightward shift of the council, which would still be a leftward shift in many cities. I suspect that some of that is going to get a bit rolled back, probably narrowing on how long you have to give before a rent increase, probably on the background checks, which was another tough one. I'm pretty sympathetic to that. I don't think that if you've committed a crime, it should dog you the rest of your career if you served your sentence. However, if someone is a recent violent offender and they're moving in next door, I think that probably is appropriate to know. Here's the thing, though. Everyone forgets that when you restrict the evictions, and I don't actually mind some of those restrictions, when you restrict evictions, you're also restricting the next person in line to get that housing, who may actually need that housing every bit as badly as the person you're trying to remove who's not paying rent or doing whatever it is that they're doing to turn an eviction. And so I think that they'll take a good look at it. I do hope that some renter protections remain, but I think that there's a lot of room here to adjust.
Yeah, the huge majority, or at least a majority of people in the city of Seattle are renters, right? So when we're talking about who are renters, it's really quite a lot of us, myself included. And I think this comes down to two issues, especially when it comes to the regulated affordable housing here, which means that you took public dollars with a promise and an exchange about that you would use those dollars in the public interest to provide affordable housing, and are asked to take on some restrictions as part of that.
And Alex, that is the case with this lawsuit filer. It's affordable housing, like 240 apartment unit in Chinatown International District.
Which means that it was largely funded, or at least partially funded, with public subsidy, our taxpayer dollars. So the public interest has a play here in the regulation around it. I think it comes down to two things. And I should mention, I'm on the board of a large affordable housing provider, and so that is, I guess, a landlord. It's two issues. It's how do you get people in? And those are some of the things around banning the box, around criminal background checks. That's about the first in line things. That's about choice about who gets to come in to your buildings. And those things are put in place to prevent try to bend the curve of a very long history of racial discrimination of housing in this country. And then the question is, okay, well, say you take some risks on some folks. How do they get to stay? And so I think the issue is really that we see in housing is when people are not able to be successful inside of your housing, either through behavior, they need a better placement, or because of non-payment of rent, how do you address those issues fast enough in order to maintain the P&L of your business and the well-being of your community? And so I think that some emphasis around how do we make sure that people are in the right place, and when they aren't, we can do something about it, is a better way of addressing this issue, which does have a huge financial impact for housing providers. Like, some of the affordable housing providers have been in the news recently of having to surplus properties in order to keep their balance sheets up. We should focus more on that than around how to make it so that it's harder for people to get into housing in the first place.
So I'll just be a little bit different from both of you here. And I know you agreed partly on this. It's not a rightward shift on the council. It's to the center a little bit here. And, it's really hard to balance all these competing and very valid issues. So each of the restrictions that have come in, make sense in their own way. But has the city, and this lawsuit will or won't tell us more about that, has the city measured the cumulative impact? Sure, this particular developer is well known around the city, is a major contributor. All of that is true. But the question is, are we making it impossible or nearly impossible for someone who is trying to provide that kind of housing to keep going? So is there a way to ease some of it? Now a court is going to step in, or the city council could preemptively try to make a few fixes. And that's clearly the goal.
Yeah, the lawsuit asks for some damages and also for some changes, easing of these restrictions in city code.
Yeah,
city
so
law.
it's up to the city council and the mayor. Do they want to get ahead of this, or do they want to hear from a court? But clearly, several people who provide this kind of housing are saying you're making it too hard for me to continue to do so.
All right, well, the Seattle Times reports that the city of Seattle plans to defend its laws. That could be in court, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the city council won't change what previous councils have done. So we'll watch that.
And that has been a large part of the policy discussions at the city council so far.
Yes.
It has been around revisiting previously adopted policies. And so I would fully anticipate that once they get through the budget season, that the council will take on some of these issues.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that leads us well into our next topic, because this idea of the city council undoing or trying to undo some of what old councils have done, the pay for delivery drivers and reinstituting the soap and soda, the stay out of these prostitution and drug areas. Well, this week, the mayor of Seattle proposed reversing the old ban on police using blast balls and other less lethal weapons on protesters. And that ban dates back to the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, when some officers injured peaceful protesters and bystanders. A federal judge held the police department in contempt. Lawsuits were settled. Mayor Harrell says that the police department learned its lessons. Joni, what's your take on this idea of allowing blast balls, these sort of grenades that can have pepper spray in them?
Well, I think this is part of trying to meet the consent decree. They have to clear up some of their policies for how they're going to handle protests. So I think that, I don't think this is some aggressive push. Oh, can we get those blast balls back? They were great.
Okay.
I think they're really just rolling through the final details of trying to get out from under the consent decree, which has been upon us for a really, really long time.
And why would allowing blast balls meet the consent decree?
They just have to have an approach to dealing with protests, and they have to have an approach that is acceptable to the folks who are saying, we're almost done here in Seattle, but we would need to see what you have under consideration, and just tell us what you intend to do with that, and we'll let you know about that. It may also just be sort of overstating this revised plan for dealing with protests.
Yeah, crowd control has been the remaining significant issue. If the goal is the city department comes out from the consent decree, crowd control is the issue that needs to get addressed in order to be able to do that. These things can be really dangerous. Like, that ban was put in place for a reason.
That's correct.
Which is that the police department at the time was using this tactic on people who were protesting, and many people got seriously injured as a result of that. And as a result of that behavior, the city has had to pay millions of dollars in lawsuits, acknowledging that they did wrong there. I don't know what has changed between now and then that makes it feel like removing that option or giving that option back to the police is a smart and wise choice, or how that would help us move forward past the consent decree. And so it's really a puzzler to me about why this suggestion is being made in the first place.
I think the puzzle would be solved if you talked to the police union.
That's very good.
I think that is usually where these things come from, right? They see things as effective on their end. And effective on their end isn't necessarily effective for a society, right? I mean, but I'm not making a decision whether or not on I don't know enough about blast balls. I do know what they did. I do understand why they were banned. But
the idea to state the obvious is to prevent, more chaos, more escalation, property damage. That's the idea behind it. Disperse the crowd. Yes, and
they're
less
lower
lethal
impact. That's how they're being considered as, in a toolbox.
Right.
Not as let's rush out there with these blazing balls.
The idea of
here.
all of this stuff is to make people uncomfortable where they are, so they'll disperse. Right. That can be done. These are mostly tear gas based or pepper spray based items. And so my guess is that the mayor, who is trying to restore mayor, council, and police relations, I think is listening to the police, primarily probably certainly the managers, but probably the union as well. And they say they want this tool. And so the mayor has to figure out whether or not, one, this tool actually does what it's supposed to do, which may not be true if you talk to some people. And then two, what... If not this, then what would actually get to the same result? And that's another question. Remember, they are, I don't think that the officer shortage should be underestimated as a factor here. I mean, they're going to use more tools like this when they are not staffed very well, right? And so I think that this is it would be nice to get some transparency on what the police are advocating for in terms of crowd control, and then start from there and then move ahead.
By the way, I'm not predicting. I don't want to predict this, but when I think street protests in Seattle, my mind goes to, 2 or 3 weeks from now?
I knew. Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, sorry, Bill.
Wait, so you have the wrong Seattle thought about what's going to happen in 2 weeks.
Oh, well, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't think it's been the experience that the use of this tool actually contributes to de-escalation. I think the experience of 2020 was actually one of a lot of rapid escalation between groups of people and the police. And Mike, my ears perked up a little bit when you talked about the recruitment. And those numbers are going up, and I think we all think that that's a good thing, so that people can get the responses that they need. But I worry about a potential recruit who wouldn't want to work for a department where you couldn't use blast balls, but sure wants to sign up for one where you can.
I don't think that's overstated. I just think that's overstated.
And I don't think that that's what I was saying.
Okay.
In fact, that is equivocally what I wasn't saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying more is that in the effort to find a way that's going to make the union happy, which is a recruitment tool, and going to make managers happy, which is a massive recruitment tool, they are going right now listening and adjusting based on what the police want, including money and including access to technology and including what the processes they have to do to expand ideas like body cams and whatnot. All of those things right now are on the table. This is the type of stuff that they're talking about. I don't think that there's any recruit out there who's making decisions based on blast ball use. And that's not what I was saying. What I was more saying is that if you want to know why the mayor is bringing this up, it's because the cops brought it up to him. That simple.
I think that's wildly overstated. That is like the key approach here. I think you can't underestimate how much these folks want to get be done with the consent decree and be able to go forward and recruit enough officers so people in Seattle feel safer. They voted that way. They want that.
We need to take a break, but before we do, since we're on protesters, a city councilor proposed a ban on protesting outside politicians' homes. This was Tanya Wu, who's running for re-election, wants to create buffer zones around elected officials' homes. Isn't the sidewalk in front of an elected official's home? That's a public space, right?
Can I say woohoo to woo here? Because I actually think this is a reasonable idea. There was quite a lot of harm done to Councilmember Deborah Juarez during the George Floyd protest. It was for me, one of the supreme low moments for our city was what was done to her. She was threatened. Her daughter was threatened.
But are those threats already illegal?
Hard
is the
to tell.
issue whether the protest is happening on a public sidewalk?
LA, Boston have limited how much you can harass public officials in their homes. I'm all for protest in the public square. I just can't get behind this. I think it's harassment and intimidation.
Anybody else?
I'm a little bit mixed on this. I actually don't know. If it's a public space, I think the public should be allowed to go there. Public in the form of a protest, if they restrict it to outside the neighborhoods of various council members or elected officials, given that these folks are at a lot of public events and they're at a lot of public meetings where protest can happen more easily, certainly more accommodating, I don't know. I agree that I don't like to see anyone in their own home, if they're an elected official, getting harassed like that, given also the collateral effect on the neighbors and everyone that they live around.
Well, how big is it? I don't know how big this buffer zone is. If you're not right in front of the elected official, aren't you in front of somebody else's home that's not involved? I don't know.
But I'm always hesitant about restrictions on protests. I really need to see how this actually would manifest itself before I can make a decision.
And I agree that in 2020 that was really rough for those elected officials, for sure.
And their neighbors.
And their
if
neighbors.
You're going to mention that. They were peeing on the neighbors' lawns, keeping them up.
At the time, City Council, everyone remember that was during lockdown, right? So there was no public place where you could go and protest the government in front of the government because the City Council was not meeting in City Hall. And so I think the conditions around that, which is that people, want to speak publicly and they want to be able to speak publicly directly to the people who can do something about it. And at that particular time, that was the only place you could do it.
You could join the Zoom.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, that's a couple of issues came up this week when it comes to the rights of tenants, the rights of protesters. We're going to take a short break because we have more to say about the week gone by on KUOW's Week in Review. We'll be right back.
KUOW-FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham. It's 12:43. We are at 55 degrees in Seattle. The forecast is for a partly sunny afternoon with a high of 62. Rain in the forecast Saturday, Sunday, and maybe Monday.
KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. I'm here with political analyst Joni Balter, Commute Seattle's Alex Hudson, Geekwire contributing editor Mike Lewis. Never before has a presidential candidate endorsed federal legalization of marijuana. Now, both of the major presidential candidates are endorsing it. Even some red states are voting on it. Florida, North Dakota, South Dakota. And there are a couple of dozen states with the recreational pot legalized. Ours was the first to officially do it. Our law took effect 4 days before Colorado's. But in any case, Joni, how come we were ahead on this, and why are so many states, even red states, following us now?
Well, so Washington and Colorado voted within hours of each other to do this back in 2012. I think the reason it was these two states, they're either libertarian or very democratic, but very focused on sort of equitable justice and the notion that the war on drugs had clearly failed. And, so they set out to create a new industry. And as we'll keep talking, so a lot of it went well and some things went wrong. And And now you, as you said, 24 states, you're going to add 3 more probably, and you have your presidential folks saying, I'm not going to get in the middle of that. So what's going on here, unfortunately, throughout the country is that we're running into now some very, very triple THC levels potent pot that is causing some significant health problems. Psychosis, one of them I can't pronounce, one of the things that's showing up in the emergency rooms. And
there's concern about brain damage, especially to young people whose brains aren't formed yet.
And, so that was one of the discussion points back then. I covered this. But I think, that it was always set out, this is an experiment, and what we need to do is sort of follow along. So I talked to the state pot people today, and they're saying, that there are some lawmakers that are working on some public health legislation. Some of it passed last year. It wasn't really big, impactful, but I think you will see maybe, hopefully, a different approach to the potency because it's a serious issue that has come up.
I think also, so the interesting thing about Washington and Colorado is they also, both states, did a lot of the local decriminalization well prior. I mean, they had the seedbed in both places, certainly in Seattle, right? But prior to the legalization, so there was this slow walking of it until it was actually legalized. These other states where you're just jumping in with legalization, I think that the only thing that can happen here that makes any sense is at a federal level. It needs to be sort of uniformly across the country. Otherwise, we are going to have states with wildly different standards on what is bought and sold and who can buy that. And I think that's a problem. And I mean, the nice thing is, like, booze is largely similar everywhere. The potency of the legal pot, that's the thing I guess I wasn't expecting, although I should have, obviously. Some of that stuff is actually, I don't know, borderline dangerous, right? I mean, it's very, very strong, and I think it catches people off guard compared to what they were used to. I'm not, citing any personal stories here, not publicly.
We're waiting. We're waiting, eager to hear.
But I think that having some sort of federal standard. I mean, and have a federal standard, you need federal legalization. So I think when we get federal legalization, we're going to actually get some sort of workable standards for marijuana in the United States.
The other benefit of federal legalization is
banking.
Banking,
right,
exactly. And right now, we all know that far too many marijuana workers and businesses are subject to armed robberies and other kind of violent property crimes, which are a direct result of having to be a cash-only business.
Completely.
Well, I think there are 3 states voting on it here in a few weeks, and we're just about
what
to half the country.
What are we at? Like half the country, right?
About 24 states now. This will make it majority. It's pretty accepted that the old way didn't work.
Yeah, and population-wise, most Americans are living in states where marijuana is prohibited.
Right. A couple of comments before we go from listeners. Bob in Fairwood agreed that the enforcement of these laws were destroying lives, hurting families. Bob says pot has downsides, but nothing like the damage the law did. Enforcement and penalties were prone to racial and economic discrimination, degrading respect for the rule of law and the institutions that applied the law. Charles in Ballard said a downside of legalization has been some of the leaders, especially around Seattle, seem to have taken the yes vote on pot to mean that Seattle residents don't mind the legalization of every other drug. I voted for the legalization of pot, but am disappointed with how the city's dealt with our drug addiction problem. I'm not the type of person that's afraid of a drug addict on the street, but there's no denying the rate of crime has gone up because of the addiction problem. A listener from Alki says legalization's been good other than the proliferation of pot store break-ins, which Alex mentioned. Attributed to the cash sale only situation. And Benjamin in Silverdale says, overall, legalization's gone well, but as a non-pot user, and a lot of people mention this, it is intrusive and gross to have to smell pot in just about every public space.
But you could do that before legalization.
Exactly, especially in Seattle, Absolutely.
If you want to join KUOW's Community Feedback Club, just go to kuow.org/feedback. Okay, we got about less than 10 minutes left in the show. Let's mention a few other stories this week. The Republican who was endorsed for governor by the state party has just quit the party. Semi Bird said, quote, "As a constitutional Christian conservative, I've come to realize the Washington State Republican Party not only operates in conflict with much of its own party platform, but also in conflict with many of my personal values." Now, Semi Bird's had his own personal conflicts with the party, so this could just be that. But when somebody that prominent leaves and suggests the party's not a place for constitutional Christian conservatives, it makes me wonder whether one of our two main parties is starting to crack up. I don't know. Any opinions?
Oh, really? One of our parties is been long cracking up. And I think, if Trump loses, Semi Bird's retirement, all of this, there are so many things that strengthen the case for the GOP in Washington State if it wants to win statewide, and even some of the local races, has to absolutely change, reform, figure out
So
if
you're saying
it's two
if Trump
parties.
wins,
If Trump wins, then MAGA is sort of, stronger than I think right now. But in this state especially, there have been cries for the last, I don't know how many years, by the former moderate members of the party, some of whom have left the party, some of who say, yeah, I'm still a Republican, but I don't really have a home. For those folks to get going, they've been talking about creating, a separate something. So time for them to do that. Semi Bird just adds to the argument to do so.
I'm not... So I don't know where this is going to end up regarding the GOP in Washington State. And I am, the first few times, 9 years ago, when I started hearing how ineffective the two-party system is and we need more parties because it would represent not on the liberal side as well as on the conservative side. Mm-hmm. But I've yet to see it actually ever get traction to a point that I actually think it's going to happen. I think the parties in the history in the United States is that once the two parties establish themselves, primarily two parties. I mean, we have Green and Independent, but I mean the real players, they flex depending on where their membership is headed. Yeah. And I think that we're less likely to see another party than we are to see the GOP in Washington State perhaps moderate itself a bit when it starts losing election after election after election, which it has a history of doing, with the exception of the rural areas in the state. My guess is that
can't win a statewide race.
Exactly.
Can't do it.
And I think that and look at the histrionics. Dave Reichert had to get on the ticket and then not get endorsed by his own party, and then have to use like this back and forth language when he was out campaigning. I mean, he was a guy who actually probably at one point had a shot, and then his constant twisting, I think, didn't help him at all from anyone who wanted to vote for him on the conservative side of the ticket. And so,
and the party's lack of support from the beginning for him damaged him. He should have gone into the primaries stronger. He's not a bad candidate for them.
Mm-hmm. He's certainly better than Lauren Culp.
Exactly.
All right.
But that's everyone.
Exactly.
We'll watch all of that. Couple other little notes. Politico reports former President Trump refused to act on a request by our Governor Inslee for federal disaster aid after the 2020 wildfires. Trump had been fighting over Trump's handling of the COVID pandemic, with Trump calling Inslee a snake. The $37 million in aid money was not approved until Biden took office. The average time for presidential approval is 17 days. Seattle Public Schools announced which 4 schools they will close: North Beach, Sacagawea, Sanislo, and Stevens Elementary Schools. 4 schools down from a proposed closing of 20 schools or so. The district's got a nearly $100 million deficit. The closures will save an estimated $5 million. The superintendent is not ruling out more closures down the road. We mentioned the CEOs of Boeing earlier. After laying off 2,500 people this year, Microsoft's CEO is getting a raise. A 63% increase.
I know, but have you looked at his stock?
Have I looked at his stock? I think it's doing quite well.
Right.
I have a friend who lives on his sailboat now who probably thinks that Satya Nadella deserves every penny.
Satya Nadella.
Wait, how does he live on his sailboat? That's pretty interesting.
I'll tell you about that.
His compensation, to the actual number, is for 2024 is $79 million.
$79 million, yes. And finally, we always make time to talk about something positive or hopeful or funny, something that made us smile this week. I saw that, since we're talking about Starbucks, The company posted, we're talking about CEOs. Starbucks posted preliminary quarterly earnings this week. They're not good. Sales down 3%. And the new CEO, Brian Niccol, promised a turnaround.
We will simplify our overly complex menu, fix our pricing architecture, and ensure that every customer feels Starbucks is worth it every single time they visit.
Okay, so one of those phrases.
Fix our pricing architecture.
I don't know if that means lowering prices or raising prices. I don't know how you fix a pricing architecture, but what really got my attention was this part.
We will simplify our overly complex menu.
Now, the problem with simplifying the Starbucks menu is that 65% of stand-up comedy routines are about complicated coffee drinks at Starbucks.
I'll have a venti half-calf caramel macchiato with no sugar, no dairy, and no coffee.
I want a tall, skinny, sugar-free, decaf, soy, vanilla latte, extra hot, whipped cream, double sleeve, no cup.
All right, let me have a chai tea with a shot of pumpkin spice, half goat milk and half breast milk.
I get very nervous when I order coffee because it's a whole world, and I don't know the world, you know? They always ask you a bunch of stuff. Like, they're like, what kind of cream? I'm like, just please do it. Just do it. You know? Sometimes they're like, do you want heavy cream or half and half? And I'll go, I'm sorry, I'm not taking questions right now. So if you could just do whatever you think it is, and if it's wrong, I won't even tell you. How about that? I will walk out of here as if that's exactly what I ordered. I will go outside, I will throw it away, and go try again in a different Starbucks. That's how I'll handle the entire, that's why I think they have so many Starbucks, so you can just keep going. Someone's got to get it.
So all of this is making me smile because if Starbucks actually simplifies its menu, comics will have to come up with a new joke, ushering in a renaissance in possibly retail food-based humor and Seattle humor. So
always with the comics, Bill. You always got
comedians.
I do hope the architecture and menu simplification allows us people who drink black drip coffee our own sort of like quick pass.
Your own lane?
You need a lane.
Just so we can get in there and get that thing and get out quickly and not have to stand behind in line for these other orders.
You're just like my dad. My dad used to walk up to the barista and say, JPOC. And they'd say, well, what's that, sir? And he'd say, just plain old coffee.
Oh, man.
But they didn't probably understand the acronym.
No, they did not.
Yeah.
Okay, just a minute or two. Who else smiled about anything this week?
I took my daughter to go see a movie at the SIF downtown, the old Cinerama, and it just made me so happy that that movie theater is back.
Agreed.
And that it's, you know, I love the dark, rainy season. I'm like, oh, I get to go to see movies in the movie theater without feeling bad, like I'm wasting precious sunlight.
Yes.
And so I like welcome the big dark. And I welcome the return of just going to go see a movie season.
Movie, that's groovy, yes.
Dr. Fraser Crane is returning to Seattle next week for only 1 week. As you know, this very popular show, originally based in Seattle, has had a mild comeback, but has moved to Boston. But the reason this is an only 1 week smile, so a little less smiling, as I tell you the next part, one of the lead characters, Roz, Dr. Crane comes back to ask her to move to the East Coast where her daughter has moved. So it's a smile and just a firm face.
Is any of this filming happening in Seattle? Are actors coming back here, or it's a plot point that it's in Seattle?
It was never filmed in Seattle, so I suspect it still won't be.
Okay, well, just wondering. That would be, it would be like a little nod. It'd be a sweet thing to do.
I've got one quick smile. Since government never gets any credit for doing things really well, the U.S. passport agency is become insanely quick. I actually found this story after I had been told by two different friends. I got a new passport. It came in 3 days.
I got 2 passports renewed in the last couple of weeks.
They have just done something. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the extra
Did you have to
copy
pay
or
for
something
the
like that.
expedited part of it? Or
No, you don't even need. Well, you can, but there's no reason to because they're turning them so quickly right now.
That's
the passport and passport card. So hats off. I mean, I think that is great. I was a little concerned that maybe this It's people anticipating the election and they're just getting ready to leave the country. But I hope that it's just a story about government efficiency.
Yes. Okay, let's hope. That is Mike Lewis, who is a contributing editor at Geekwire, and he's here with Joni Balter, political analyst, contributing columnist, who's here with Alex Hudson, Commute Seattle's executive director. Great show, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, producer Kevin Kniestet, board runner, guru, Swami knows all, Bernard Willett, Juan Pablo Chiquiza, Hans Twite with social media live streaming support. Hans and I made a great video for our upcoming Year in Review show. That's on social media somewhere. Join us Year in Review, December 11th. I'm Bill Radke. We'll see you again next week.
Support for KUOW comes from the Seattle Art Museum, featuring the retrospective of Joyce J. Scott, Walk a Mile in My Dreams. Spanning her career of 50 years, Scott's art utilizes a variety of mediums to confront racism, sexism, and classism. Tickets and information at seattleartmuseum.org.
Welcome to News Hour from the BBC.